Good morning, I'm Taylor Wilson, and today is Friday, August 9th, 2024. This is The Excerpt. Today, Trump and Harris have agreed to debate. Plus, Harris running mate Tim Walz's military background is under fire, and shoplifting is more common than you think. Former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris said yesterday that they plan to debate on September 10th. Trump's campaign also put forth debate dates of September 4th and September 25th, with details to be worked out with the Harris campaign. About the debate and potential further debates, Trump told reporters, quote, "I think they'll be very revealing," unquote. And Harris told reporters about the September date, quote, "I hear he's finally committed to it, and I'm looking forward to it," unquote. As for the possibility of other debates, Harris said she's happy to have the conversation about an additional debate. ABC News, which had previously scheduled a debate between Trump and President Joe Biden, said it will host the September 10th debate. In recent days, Trump had suggested he might withdraw from the ABC agreement because of conflicts with the network and the fact that Biden has withdrawn from the race and Harris has stepped in. Democratic vice presidential candidate Tim Walz's National Guard service is under the microscope and has become an immediate target of former President Donald Trump's campaign. I spoke with USA Today Pentagon correspondent Tom Vandenbroek for more. Tom, thanks for hopping on.
Taylor, good to be here.
Always good having you, Tom. So let's just start with this. What do we know about Governor Tim Walz's military background, and what has he himself said about it?
We know that he was in the National Guard. He enlisted at age 17, and that helped him pay GI Bill for college. He served for 24 years. He attained the rank of Command Sergeant Major, but he didn't retire at that rank because he did not complete coursework for it. So there's a little bit of controversy about that, though not much, in that he retired as a Master Sergeant. The bigger part of the controversy is, according to the Trump campaign, and in particular the vice presidential nominee, that he has exaggerated his service and claimed what they say is stolen valor, that he made claims that he served in combat when he didn't. It's a bit of a stretch to say that.
I want to hear a little bit more about kind of what the Trump campaign approach is here. As you mentioned, Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance in particular, is talking about this timeline of Walz's retirement from the National Guard and how it kind of stacks up with the war in Iraq. How have they gone on the offensive here, Tom, and what is he saying about that timeline?
Right. They're citing some of Walz's former comrades in his unit in the Minnesota National Guard who have said that Walz retired before they deployed to Iraq for a tough deployment in 2005, and that he saw it coming and ducked out. That's what they claim, and the timeline shows that he retired in 2005, but that was 2 months before his unit was mobilized for Iraq. There are indications, however, that the unit knew that there was a deployment coming up. He acknowledges that too in some ways. So that's the issue, how you characterize it, right? Others look at that record, including a senior National Guard official at the time said it was not unusual at all for a National Guard soldier with 24 years in, as Walz was at the time, and in his 40s to retire. The previous year, his unit had deployed not to combat, it deployed to Europe. So Walz said he wanted to retire so he could run for Congress, which he did and won.
And Tom, we should clarify, J.D. Vance has his own military history. Can you fill in folks on that if they're not aware?
Sure. J.D. Vance went through boot camp, which is no picnic for the Marines, and he served in the Marine Corps and deployed to Iraq at the height of the Iraq War when the Marines were in Anbar province, primarily in western Iraq. There was bad fighting there. It should be said that he was a public affairs Marine at the time and was mostly on a base. But nonetheless, those bases, Al-Assad, where he was, were regularly rocketed. It was not a good place to be.
And has Governor Walz or the Kamala Harris campaign responded to any of these criticisms?
A little bit. They have not really directly taken on some of these issues. They point to his service record and the dates and when he retired, and that was well before the mobilization of his unit. They also have addressed one of the criticisms that Walz at one point said he carried weapons he took to war. Well, he never was in combat. So was he overstating that? That's a fair read of it, but he was an artilleryman. He certainly carried a weapon at some point. He was familiar with cannons. You can judge that as you might.
Tom, this isn't the first time that sort of history of military service has come up in the political world, especially in election cycles. How have we seen this issue come up before in past elections?
Very recently, Taylor, we may remember not that long ago that former President Trump had 5 deferments from the Vietnam War. 4 of those were academic, and one was, as the New York Times reported, for apparently bone spurs in his foot. At the same time, President Biden also had 5 deferments. Now, these were Vietnam era guys, right? Biden had 4 deferments for academic reasons as well, and one for, I believe it was asthma. So it's not unusual at all to have military records questioned or to have them scrutinized, certainly at this level.
Tom, Walz made the military a pretty big part of his first speech as Harris's running mate earlier this week. He talked about the GI Bill and veterans. How do we expect the military broadly to play out as a theme during the rest of this election cycle? And might any of this pushback from the Trump campaign change how Walz himself talks about his own military history?
That remains to be seen. It's not as though he didn't serve, right? He's in there for 24 years. And he has made a point of noting that it's part of his story, right? He was a National Guardsman for 24 years. He also makes central to his biography the fact that he was a high school teacher and a football coach. So this isn't the only sort of identity that he's running on. I know a lot of people will remember back in 2004 that John Kerry, of course, he served in the Senate at that point, but he made a big point during the Iraq War at the time that he was a Vietnam War veteran and was a decorated Navy sailor.
Great breakdown on all this for us. Tom Vandenbroek covers the Pentagon for USA Today. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Taylor.
Are you getting headaches after Tropical Storm Debbie? There may be a reason for that, and it's not just the stress associated with Debbie's continuous rainfall. Sudden barometric pressure changes during tropical systems can cause sinus pressure, resulting in a chemical imbalance and headache, the Nebraska University Health Center says. Barometric pressure is the weight of the air. The pressure is higher when it's dry and lower when wet. The humidity associated with a tropical system often plummets barometric pressure quickly, causing quick changes to sinus pressure. Tropical Storm Debbie was expected to produce up to 8 inches of rain across parts of the East Coast through yesterday, with some 19 million people under a flood watch at one point. Shoplifting is more common than you think. I discussed new survey findings with USA Today personal finance reporter Daniel Devise. Hey there, Daniel.
Hey, good to be here.
Thanks for hopping on. So let's just start with this, Daniel. How common is shoplifting according to this new survey?
Well, I didn't know until I read this new survey because I've never seen data on this before. But it says that around 1/4 of adults sort of fess up to having shoplifted. This is according to LendingTree.
And how often do shoplifters get caught?
Around half said that they'd been caught. Isn't that amazing? 48% of the people who said they had shoplifted had been caught in the act at some point.
Wow. So I'm always curious with this, Daniel, what are the driving motives behind shoplifting and what are the items people usually steal?
Some of this is kind of self-evident. Like we all know people, maybe ourselves from childhood, who did this on a dare or to get a thrill. I think some of this thrill seeking that attends shoplifting endures into adulthood. And that's where you get into your Britney Spears and your Winona Ryder. Both of them have been accused of shoplifting kind of famously. It can also signal psychological problems like depression. It can be a cry for help. And this is the poignant thing is for many people, especially in today's economy, it can be because they're broke, and just can't afford basic items. That was what came out loud and clear in this new survey.
So, Daniel, I think we've all had experiences at this point with these self-checkout machines. They can be annoying and frustrating, I think, for many folks. But at some stores, it's really the only way to buy your items. I think of the pharmacy chains, especially.
Feels like it.
Yeah, right? Does this encourage shoplifting, Daniel, or make it easier?
Well, that's a complicated question. The retailers also have a complicated relationship with self-checkout. They've been pulling back on it this year, and USA Today has reported that some of the big chain stores, I think Target is one, Dollar General, and they're talking about theft, switching price tags around and other misdeeds, as well as a legitimate concern about customer experience. I'll tell you this, LendingTree, who did this survey on shoplifting, they do see a connection. The reason they did this survey was they did an earlier survey about self-checkout. And 69% of the people surveyed said that they believed that the technology of self-checkout makes it easier to steal.
So how much does this actually hurt the stores, Daniel? I mean, can they sustain this level of shoplifting? And what sorts of changes are they making to try and prevent it?
The most common shoplifted things are pretty small things. Food, non-alcoholic drinks, that kind of surprised me. Wouldn't you want to steal an expensive bottle of booze or something? So a lot of it's small stuff, but we can't take it for granted because the retail industry lost $112 billion in 2022, the most recent year available, for shrink, which is not just shoplifting, but also employee theft. And it also covers this big deal, organized retail crime that's like shoplifting on a vast scale. So it's a big deal. And this is partly why prices are going up. It's not just because of inflation, it's also because of shrink.
Interesting findings. Daniel Devise covers personal finance for USA Today. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.
A pair of giant pandas that arrived in San Diego from China a little more than a month ago have finally debuted and are now on display for the public at San Diego Zoo. Yun Chuan and Xing Bao were the first pandas to enter the United States in 21 years and were unveiled to the public in a grand ceremony yesterday. For more on pandas and panda diplomacy, check out our special deep dive episode from earlier this summer. We have a link in today's show notes. And thanks for listening to The Excerpt. We're produced by Shannon Ray Green, and our executive producer is Laura Beatty. You can get the podcast wherever you get your audio, and if you're on a smart speaker, just ask for The Excerpt. I'm Taylor Wilson, and I'll be back tomorrow with more of The Excerpt from USA Today.